Taking a look at an interesting piece from the Los Angeles Times. This reservoir was built to save the Pacific Palisades. It was empty when the flames came. It's a reservoir, it's San Ynez Reservoir, literally right up behind Pacific Palisades. It's all set up and ready to have 117 million gallons of water. Dead empty when the flames came. Gavin Newsom, well, let's get into it. Let's see what he had to say when he was immediately called out for talking some nonsense. Here we go. This is what that looks like we're talking about. Here's the reservoir. Here's the Pacific Palisades. I mean, it doesn't get much more direct than that, right? I mean, it's right there. Well, let's check out Gruesome Newsom and what he has to say here.
We do know, though, from reporting here locally that one reservoir that serves the Palisades was not full.
And that's exactly what triggered my desire to get the investigation to understand what was happening.
He's on it.
Reservoir that was not a state system reservoir, which the president-elect was referring to as it relates to the Delta, and somehow the Delta smelt to this fire, which is inexcusable because it's inaccurate, also incomprehensible to anyone that understands water policy in the state.
Well, then why was it empty? Why was it empty? I mean, good questions, right? So one of my reasons for covering this is I watched Chinatown over the weekend. Yep, I had to pay $3.99 on Amazon. Jack Nicholson, the whole concept of Chinatown is the corruption with who controls water. Who controls water? So one of my thoughts here is you can tell me all day long, well, we couldn't do anything with the 100-mile-an-hour winds. All right. Yeah. Okay. I get that. But when it comes to the firemen having empty fire hydrants when they went to use water, and when they, basically blew out all their reservoirs by Wednesday morning, like 3:00 in the morning or something. Flames really started on Tuesday. By Wednesday, they're out of water. I mean, there's just so much to these stories that don't make any sense whatsoever. So I think there's a lot going on here behind the scenes. And let's talk about it a little bit. After flames leveled nearly 500 homes in Bel Air and Brentwood in 1961, Los Angeles had a reckoning over firefighting. Hey, burn them all down. What's going on? Oh, let's get some firefighters up here. Let's get some fire hydrants. Let's get some reservoirs going. By 64, city leaders had added 13 fire stations, mapped out fire hydrants, purchased helicopters, and dispatched more crews to the Santa Monica Mountains. To accommodate growth in Pacific Palisades, they built a reservoir in Santa Ynez Canyon, as well as a pumping station to increase fire protection. As the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power's then chief water engineer, Gerald W. Jones, told the Times in 1972, this is what we're doing. To protect this community that's being built, this is what we're doing. Some Palisades residents had initially fought having a reservoir so close, fearing a repeat of the 63 Baldwin Hills disaster when a reservoir failed, killing 5 people and destroying about 280 homes. In the decades since, the Santa Ynez Reservoir became a source of comfort. Hey, get all the water up there, guys. All that water. I used to say all the time, boy, I know one thing that will never happen in our place. Will not burn down, said Peggy Holter, who in 78 purchased a townhouse in Palisades Highlands, just a stone's throw from the reservoir. It was one thing I was never worried about. We got plenty of water. That reservoir right up there, it's all good. But on January 7th, the reservoir that had long been a lifeline was empty when the Palisades residents needed it most, as a wildfire spread rapidly among dangerously high winds. Boy, talk about being caught with your pants down. Emperor has no clothes. So Newsom tried to spin it off as, well, that's an LA City reservoir. That's not a state reservoir. Oh, we don't really know anything about what's going on. He's the governor of the whole state. You're responsible for everything, including when your cities have individual issues. That falls on you as well, because they report up to you, right? I think if the reservoir had been there and they were sucking out of it, I'm sure that our building would have been saved, said Holter, who lived in a 36-unit condo complex. Holter's townhouse and others in the complex survived the first night of the fire, but later burned down after water pressure in the area diminished. Firefighters didn't have enough water to fight the fires. I mean, how many videos are out there of a firefighter, holding his hose and there's just nothing going on? Nothing going on. Hard to fight fires with that. Now, you can say that all of the resources that were used instantaneously as they tried to fight the magnitude of these fires, okay? But at some point in time, you got to recognize there's stuff going on here that shouldn't have been going on. I mean, the fire department just went DEI hard. I think a lot of emphasis on things that should have been prioritized simply weren't prioritized. When the weather service calls out these huge Santa Ana winds that are coming, I mean, and then you've got the mayor running off to Ghana. Literally, mayor's running off to Ghana. I mean, just this whole enormous cluster of nonsense. The 117 million gallon reservoir was offline for repairs when this fire came. It sparked outrage against the water company and its leadership, prompting at least 2 lawsuits and spurring Governor Gavin Newsom to order an investigation to cover his ass. What do we got going on here, Governor? I don't know, but these guys, let's blame them. Let's get an investigation going. Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass, who was in Ghana at the time when it started, has also promised a complete assessment of the city's response to the wildfire. Hey, why don't you go out and look at all 17,000 structures that were destroyed? How about that? What about that? Let's take a look at all those. I mean, the destruction, it's going to take years. I think I just did a podcast where we talked about 8 to 10 years to rebuild. I mean, you've got, all kinds of commissions and, 15, 20 different permits you got to pull before you can, rebuild a home. You got to get plans together, architects' drawings, multiple submissions to the whatever city, county, whatever it might be. It's going to take forever to get this done. And if they do the shortcuts that they're talking about, those shortcuts are meant to safeguard construction process. So you're not meant to build 1 million homes all at once. You're just not meant to do that. It's a slow build out, right? So you don't have all this impact on everything infrastructure wise. So, you've got a situation now where people from the Palisades, they're gone. I mean, they're renting elsewhere. Their community is gone. It's toasted. So former and current water officials acknowledged that if the reservoir had held water, higher elevation areas of the Palisades would have had more water pressure. Interesting. Got water right over there, but there was none in it. Therefore, there's no water here. That makes sense to me, right? If they would have held water, higher elevation areas of the Palisades would have had more water pressure, but it's unclear for how long. Okay, but, that can't be used as an excuse as to why there was no water pressure. The reservoir remains empty, and the chief of water operations told the Times that the repairs will not be done until April or May. God, what if they have another fire and this thing is still empty? Incredible. Incredible. The episode has drawn an urgent question from residents and city leaders. Why was the reservoir empty for nearly a year? The saga traces back to January 2024 when a water property manager, spotted a tear in the reservoir's floating cover after a series of rainstorms. For decades, the reservoir sat uncovered until the city in 2012 installed a large floating membrane to comply with federal regulations. The cover is meant to prevent animals and debris from contaminating the water and to limit algae and bacteria. Well, a few animals, a little bit of debris and algae and bacteria. If you would have had some water with that in it, it would have been okay to fight those fires, right? But hey, let's drain the whole 117 million gallons. Let's wait for a year for this $89,000 repair to the cover to take place. Why didn't they leave the water in there during this time? I mean, does the water get contaminated? And then it's just, if you're going to have to replace it all anyway, just leave the water in there. Is it a liability issue if you don't have the cover on? Make it make sense, right? I don't think you're going to. You're not going to come up with a reasonable explanation. Some middle manager is just going to get his ass absolutely handed to him. And Gavin Newsom's going to go, that guy. Blame that guy. When a property manager saw the tear again 2 days later, it seemed to have grown, according to the emails. At the time, the reservoir held about 56 million gallons of water, less than half. Remember, it holds 117 million. Policy calls for minor repairs to the cover to be addressed within 48 hours of discovery. Major repairs, however, required specialized skills and are contracted out, the manual indicates. Wouldn't it be important if people's lives, if people's homes, if people's properties are on the line to have a reservoir ready to roll? I mean, these are just some of the questions that I don't stay up late at night thinking about it because it's not my community, but it kind of makes you think, what in the heck happened here? Like literally, chain of command. Yeah, it's okay. We don't need that one. This is a known area with wildfire risk, right? That's why the insurance companies are literally pulling out as we speak. It's unclear how the water company assessed the tear, but in either case, the manual reflects urgency. Make repairs ASAP as directed by the engineer. That seems pretty reasonable, doesn't it? But by late January, the DWP was developing a plan for repairs and had a target date for bringing the reservoir back by April 2024. Hope we don't have any fires by then. Before higher demands in the late spring and summer, the emails indicate. But it had already been offline for a year. There was one hitch. Emptying the reservoir was time-consuming, and sending that much water down a drain and creek after back-to-back rains risked significant erosion. Do you rather have erosion or your whole city burned down? Take your pick. According to emails, instead, the officials wanted to keep the reservoir running despite the tear, letting residents use 20 million gallons before draining the rest. Now, here's where we get into it. State officials appear to have balked at that plan. Nope, we're not going to do that. Some genius. An engineer with the State Water Resources Control Board said his team was not supportive of allowing the Santa Ynez Reservoir to go back in service in late January. Their decision is apparently not based on the sampling results provided earlier today, which demonstrated that samples collected yesterday did not contain bacteria. So you're supposed to have a lid on it to protect it from bacteria. And the samples they had, there's no bacteria. Okay. Let's go ahead and drain it and empty it, and we'll just work on that, that cover for the reservoir while it's down. Still, fire doesn't come. Fingers crossed. However, the tear in the reservoir's cover posed an ongoing threat of contamination, even after tests, because debris, feces, or other materials could pollute the water. Yeah, but don't they have filtration systems for that, chlorination, and all kinds of other stuff? You know what I mean? Yeah, I get it. You need a cover. But if this is a source of water for fire hydrants, then you're unnecessarily placing people's lives at risk. Or am I missing something here? Yeah, right? I mean, that's what goes through my head. The DWP began draining the water from the reservoir, a process that can take up to 2 months. In April, the utility issued an invitation for bids to repair the cover, which put the cost at $89,000. That is literally, pun intended, a drop in the bucket or no drop in the bucket in case you're looking for water coming out of this reservoir. $89,000 is the cost, is why this thing was drained. An $89,000 repair. To put that in perspective of a water company, that is like a, $8.99 part that you need to make your car go again. That's what it is, right? Only one company, Layfield Group, which had installed the cover in 2012, turned in a bid, and the contract was finalized November 21st for about $130,000. All right. So we go $41,000 over. We'll do it. For the months when the reservoir was empty, its absence barely drew notice. Residents still had water to fill or shower or fill their pools. The state's wider water system supplied enough to the area, and helicopters could land at the reservoir's helipad to refill from a hookup linked to the water system. The DWP was not detailed the timeline, but said in a statement that the repairs were subject to the city's charter's competitive bidding process, which requires time. So my question is, why did you drain it? I mean, if you were going to drain it anyway, when you got to put the cover on, wait till you got the cover. leave it filled. We didn't want to risk contamination. But if you're going to drain it anyway, what's the point? It doesn't matter, right? Something just doesn't add up here. Given the multiple lawsuits filed against the Los Angeles Water Department and Power in light of the Palisades fires, the city attorney insisted to not join us today. He ain't here for this meeting because he might have that subpoenaed. So, more residents of the Upper Palisades are contemplating litigation, according to multiple interviews. Not shocking. Water systems experts said that with extreme Santa Ana winds that prevented the use of planes and helicopters, Palisade fire was impossible to control, and that municipal water systems aren't equipped for such blazes. But you need to be as equipped as you humanly can be, and then you have no excuses. You've got a big, huge excuse here for why there wasn't water in this one reservoir. And I haven't had a reasonable answer yet, other than just a bunch of incompetence that we're reading about. Palisades residents, meanwhile, are taking stock of the long and costly rebuilding process. So if this reservoir would have been filled with 117 million gallons of water, could they have saved some of this area? Could they have saved a lot of the area? I don't know. 100-mile-an-hour winds kicking embers up and throwing them, a couple miles down the road. I don't know. But what comes to my mind is there's just a bunch of fishy stuff going on here that doesn't make a lot of sense. Hunter Simon, who lived with his family about 2,000 feet away from the reservoir, believes his home would not have burned down if the reservoir had been filled. In previous fires, he benefited from the proximity, with helicopters inadvertently dropping water on his property, even if the flames weren't close by. He got a little bit of spillage. He got a little collateral damage, meaning the water, which he was probably very thankful for. You betcha. Dump some water on my house. It won't catch on fire that way. You never evacuate really thinking you're saying goodbye to something, Simon said. Whew. Absolutely nuts, right? All right. LA $750,000 a year water chief, Janice Quinones, knew about empty reservoir and broken hydrants months before fires. You know, a bunch of officials knew about this and they're like, well, I just hope nothing happens because it hadn't happened in this scale. But then you've got a weather system with the Santa Ana winds that just literally blows in. And then you got some firebugs out there. You got some homeless people lighting fires. Who knows what started it? Could have been a downed power line where you don't clear out the vegetation underneath the power lines. It sparks up and poof. Yeah, I mean, any one of those things could have started these fires, but then your ability to combat them, that's kind of what we're talking about. $750,000 a year LA water czar is responsible for a raft of failures that contributed to the devastating Palisades fire, fire department insiders told dailymail.com. On Mayor Karen Bass's orders, the city maxed out its budget to attract private sector talent. Now Quinones is being blamed by the LA Fire Department for leaving a nearby reservoir disconnected and fire hydrants broken for months, leading to firefighters running out of water as they battled the devastating Palisades fire this week. And Daily Mail has learned Quinones' past employer is also linked to fire scandals. She was previously a top executive electric company, Pacific Gas and Energy, PG&E. Puget's my utility here, which bankrupt over liability for several massive fires in California. Okay. Yeah, so here we've got, more fire officials or more water officials that just seem to be kind of bumbling their way through all this. I mean, it's not shocking, but when you're looking right at it, you're going, well, how did that happen? What's that lawsuit going to look like? Former DWP General Manager Martin Adams told the paper that having the Santa Ynez Reservoir would have helped fight the Palisades fire that wiped out most of the Pacific Palisades neighborhood this week. Would Santa Ynez have helped? Yes, to some extent. Would it have saved the day? I don't think so. Because those winds were just absolutely screaming, weren't they? It just seems like there's so much we're not being told because as just, non-experts, but people who live in communities where you need water. Everybody needs water if you're going to fight a fire. We don't have the same fire risk here in the Seattle area just because we've got, really wet, typically winters. And yeah, we get some dry summers. And yeah, we've got some, fire risk here in Washington, but it's not nearly as hot as a California environment. So you don't have all that risk. Everything gets just really soggy during the winter because we got so much rain, or we typically do. This January has been really, really dry. We've had some really good weather, meaning it's cold, but it is clear and you don't have a bunch of rain coming down. But when you are a community like the Palisades, you depend on that because it's a known wildfire risk. That's why these companies have literally been pulling out left and right. And you're left with this whole notion of you knew a fire might happen. You knew you had the winds coming, but I guess because it's such a deal to put water back in the reservoir, to have that lid ready to go. If they're not going to get this done, and it doesn't matter now because there's nothing to save, right? There's nothing to save in the Pacific Palisades. It's gone. It's toasted. So will we get even a, tenth of the truth on what happened here? I think we've been just throwing a bunch of information and, hey, yeah, it wouldn't have really mattered all that much. How much would it have mattered? How much would it have mattered? How much positive impact would it have had? And it's not just this one reservoir, is it? It's the whole thing. You got the mayor of Los Angeles in Ghana, while this is going on. And then you've got gruesome Newsom just running around trying to explain to people, saying some stuff. We're like, hey, all of our reservoirs were filled. And what he was talking about was he was talking about the state reservoirs. He wasn't talking about the city reservoirs. So, you got to take responsibility for the whole thing. But in my opinion, there is very little responsibility being taken for so many of these issues that when you put that all together, it kind of makes you think, you know what? Maybe the books are cooked on this bad boy because so much of this, it does not make sense. All right. That's it for me on this one. Thanks so much for being here. I'll catch up with you on the next one. Bye for now.